I practice architecture. I'm not a theoretician. What, in the beginning, what I felt was that I need a context. What kind of architecture shall I do?
No, validation is, I think, alone will not make probably much sense unless you link it to time, culture, place. Because validation for architecture, for me, may not be same as architect from Australia. It's a kind of validation which is kind of culture-based, time-based, and location-based. Because I was brought up environmentally, culturally, very differently from another person from another country. So I think we have to discuss validation from the point of view of place. Are you discussing an international validation of architecture, which is global in nature? Or are you discussing validation in terms of place-based validation? Is it validation for that kind of architecture that you should be doing in Bangladesh, for example? So I'll take your point. I think you have to be more specific when you say, does architecture validate? So I think it has to be kind of specific. The moment you broaden it and make it international, then I think we'll begin to fail to define the covenant of validation or the expected validation that Bangladeshi people want the kind of architecture they want. I think I'm a bit confused, like you, is what is the validation? Is it time-based? It is culture-based? What validation are you talking about? I was wondering, does validation have to be objective? Or it can remain in the realms of subjectivity? I'll give an example. For example, we do not consider client in terms of validation of architecture. I'm a practicing architect. We face constantly clients who likes glitz very much, which I personally dislike. So there is a contradiction. Now, how do I validate my work in relation to the client's demand? So I was wondering, is there any way that, probably it is the work of the critics, but is there any way that validation can be objectively looked at? Is there any mechanism? I think that would be important, because subjectivity will keep it in the realm of uncertainty and controversy, unacceptability by people. How do we make validation of architecture objective? I think that is a criteria I feel is very important. Objective in the sense of acceptability of validation by all groups of people, even the users. Is it feasible? That's one aspect that we have to look at. Is it possible to do that?
And the context is, I found that the best way to describe us is probably more from a spiritual and cultural point of view. And this, I was going through a book where, in reference to South Asian literature, human beings secured things from Kalpadruna. This is the kind of mindset that I started having to understand what kind of architecture I should do. The idea of this is to shape of construction over and around wooden pillar seem to suggest a close resemblance to shady tree providing shelter to the earliest people from sun and rain. The reason, the cosmic nature of these pillars is to kind of recreate that feeling of living in a tree as the shade from sun and rain. Flooded zone, there is a need for artwork. And artwork in architecture is such an important thing. Rosemary Blatter has said artwork is fundamental to architecture. And both type of material procedures, stereotomic and tectonic, is used. This is the kind of information that one would like, I was getting, to have a feel of what kind of architecture element or architecture practice I should have. This is a picture I took of Dhaka city. This is a cityscape. This is two cityscape. And it was really, I was wondering that it's basically a copy of the developed world architecture, where there is a complete, the architects were not giving enough thoughts to power requirement into the building and the orientation of these buildings. So that, I think, an embedded energy of the material that are used here is probably not sustainable. Actually, I find, after having seen this kind of cityscape, I was going through books. I found Hans Sedlmayr wrote in 1941 on inorganic and organic materials, use of materials which are organic and use of materials which are inorganic. Quote, "The shift of man's spiritual center of gravity towards the inorganic, his feeling of his way into the inorganic world, may indeed legitimately be called cosmic disturbance in the microcosm of man, who now begins to show one-sided development of his faculties. At the other extreme, there is a disturbance of microcosmic relationship, a result of special favor and protection which the inorganic now enjoys. Almost always at the expense of, not to say ruin, of the organic, the raping and destruction of the earth, the nourisher of man, is an obvious example and one which in its turn reflects the distortion of the human microcosm from the spiritual." Unquote.